Long before the tales of kingdoms and princes, before the mirror learned to whisper truth and envy, there was a wish made in winter's breath, a queen, longing for a child as pure as snow, and a destiny that would one day awaken the jealous heart of the world. This is the original story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a magical fairy tale of jealousy, innocence, and destiny, told as it was meant to be heard. Once upon a time, before time itself was counted in the calendars of kings, there lay a kingdom hidden beneath snow and silence. Its towers pierced the clouds, and its gardens slept beneath blankets of white, dreaming of spring. In this quiet realm, where frost painted lace upon every window pane, a queen sat by her window, her sewing needle glinting faintly in the pale morning light. Every stitch she made was neat, perfect, for she was a woman of grace and quiet sorrow. The castle was large, echoing with the ghosts of laughter long forgotten. Though she wore a crown, her heart longed for something far humbler, a child of her own. As she sewed, the queen pricked her finger with the needle. A single bead of crimson welled upon her skin, bright as a ruby, deep as a promise. It fell upon the snow on her windowsill, and she watched as the red melted into the white. "Oh," she whispered, her breath catching like the wind in lace curtains. "How beautiful the contrast, white as snow, red as blood, black as the ebony frame that holds this window." She lifted her eyes toward the woods beyond the frozen fields. "I wish for a child," she murmured softly. "With skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, a heart pure, gentle, and true." The wish, light as a sigh, drifted into the winter sky. Some say it was caught by the snowflakes themselves, that the north wind carried it to where forgotten dreams sleep, and laid it before the throne of destiny. That night, as stars trembled like tears upon heaven's cheek, the queen's wish was heard. In due time, her wish was granted. The kingdom awoke one morning to the tolling of silver bells, the sound of joy and miracle. The queen had given birth to a daughter, fair and delicate, with skin white as snow, lips red as new roses, and hair as black as midnight velvet. "She shall be called Snow White," the king declared, his voice breaking with pride. The queen held the child close, her frail hand tracing the curve of the baby's cheek. She smiled, though the color had drained from her face, for her strength was fading. "My little Snow White," she whispered, "you are my wish come true." And before the moon rose that night, the queen's breath slipped quietly into eternity, as though she had given the last of her life to create such beauty. Years passed. The castle, though still grand, seemed emptier without her laughter. The king, lonely and wearied by sorrow, remarried, as kings often did in those days, for the sake of duty and appearance. The new queen was strikingly beautiful, tall, poised, and radiant as sunlight on steel. But her beauty was of the kind that demands reflection. She could not bear the idea of being unseen, unadmired, or surpassed. In her chamber stood a mirror, unlike any in the mortal world. Its frame was gold and carved with serpents biting their tails, the symbol of eternity. The glass shimmered faintly, even in the dark. Every morning, she stood before it and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And the mirror, with a voice smooth as silver and cold as truth, replied, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." The queen would smile, her vanity fed for another day. But as the years turned, Snow White grew, not just in grace and beauty, but in spirit. Her laughter returned to the empty halls like birds to spring. Servants adored her. Children peered through the gates just to glimpse her kindness. The queen began to notice, and noticing became envy. Envy, like ivy, crept into her thoughts. At first she brushed it away, a trifle. Then she avoided Snow White's gaze altogether. Then came the dreams, of mirrors shattering, of red upon white. Until one morning, the queen's question was answered differently. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" The mirror hesitated, then whispered, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White is fairer than you." The room fell silent. The queen's face twisted, her breath caught between disbelief and fury. Her reflection, her rival, lived in the same palace. The thought consumed her. Each glance at Snow White's innocence felt like a blade in her pride. Each word of kindness the girl spoke was an insult to her bitterness. The queen's beauty began to wane, not in her face, but in her eyes. For envy is the thief of grace. Late one night, she called for her huntsman, a loyal man, trembling before her. "Take Snow White into the deep forest," she commanded, "and bring me her heart. Do this, and speak of it to no one." The huntsman bowed low, though his soul shook. He had seen cruelty in war, but never such coldness in a single breath. As dawn painted the mountains pale, he led Snow White into the forest, away from the castle, past the streams that whispered secrets. Snow White followed quietly, humming to herself, her basket of berries swinging in her hand. She trusted him. When they reached the clearing, he stopped. His hand trembled as he drew his knife. The girl turned, her dark hair glinting in sunlight. "Why do you look so sad, good sir?" she asked. He fell to his knees. "Forgive me, my lady. I was sent to take your life." Snow White gasped, the basket falling from her hand. "But why? I've done no harm." Her innocence broke him. He could not lift his arm. He dropped the knife. "Run," he said hoarsely. "Run, child, and never return. The queen must believe you dead." He turned away, tears streaking the dirt on his face. And to deceive his queen, he killed a wild boar instead, taking its heart back as proof. Snow White ran through the forest, her breath sharp and ragged. Branches clawed at her sleeves, roots tangled her feet, owls cried in the distance. Every rustle sounded like pursuit. At last, exhausted and trembling, she stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. And there, half hidden among the trees, stood a small cottage with smoke curling from its chimney. She crept to the window. Inside, 7 little chairs, 7 plates, 7 neat beds, everything small, tidy, and oddly endearing. Hunger gnawed at her, so she tasted a bit of bread, sipped a bit of milk, and at last lay down upon the smallest bed. Her eyes fluttered shut. For the first time that day, she felt safe. The fire crackled softly, the wind whispered through pine branches. And so began the long night of her new life, hidden, fragile, and filled with the quiet promise of fate. The forest slept beneath a blue twilight, breathing softly through moss and fern. Shadows moved gently, not cruelly now, for they seemed to know this lost child had fled something darker than night itself. Snow White stirred in her borrowed bed, her lashes trembling like moth wings. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the memory returned. The huntsman's mercy, the queen's fury, the wild forest that nearly swallowed her. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered, "Thank you, to no one and everyone, to fate perhaps, or the forest itself." But not far away, through the deepening dusk, 7 lanterns bobbed like golden fireflies. Their owners were returning from the mines, their boots echoing with rhythm, their laughter rough but kind. "Look sharp, lads," said one with a voice like gravel and honey. "There's light in our window." "Someone's been in our house," muttered another, peering through the window pane. "Impossible. Who would find us out here?" said a third, his beard tangled like roots. And yet, when they opened the door, the truth met them. A stranger's touch in every corner. The plates had crumbs, the spoons had stains of soup, and the chairs had been moved just slightly. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" said one. "Who's been eating from my plate?" said another. "Who's been drinking from my cup?" said a third. And then, the smallest of them pointed toward the beds. "Someone's been sleeping in my bed. And look, there, under a patchwork quilt, lay the most beautiful girl they had ever seen. Her hair spilled like black silk over the pillow. Her skin glowed like pearl in the firelight. She looked more like a spirit than a person, some lost creature of snow and dreams. They didn't wake her. Instead, they sat quietly, watching in awe until the fire burned low and the stars blinked sleepily above the forest. At dawn, when the first pale light touched the curtains, Snow White stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and 7 small faces looked back at her, wide-eyed and curious. "Oh," she gasped, sitting up quickly. "Who are you?" One stepped forward, the eldest, with spectacles balanced on his nose. "We might ask the same of you, dear child," he said kindly. "This is our home." "I didn't mean to intrude," she said softly. "I lost my way in the forest. I was so hungry, so tired." They exchanged glances. Though their faces were weathered by work and time, their hearts were quick to forgive. "Stay, if you will," said another, the youngest with freckles and a bright grin. "Keep our home neat and warm, and you may stay as long as you like. We'll protect you." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Truly?" she whispered. "Truly," they all said together. And so it was agreed. Snow White became the heart of that little cottage. Each morning, she swept the floor, baked warm bread, and sang soft songs that reminded the dwarfs of daylight even underground. When they left for the mines, they would say, Be careful, dear Snow White. Let no one in while we're away. The Queen may yet discover you live. She promised every day to be careful, but fate, as it often does, was already turning its wheel. Far away in the cold marble chambers of the castle, the Queen stood once again before her mirror. Mirror, mirror on the wall, she purred, her voice silken but sharp. Who is the fairest one of all? The mirror rippled, the surface darkening as if it feared its own truth. Then the familiar voice, soft as smoke, heavy as regret, answered, You, my Queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White beyond the hills with 7 dwarfs is fairer still. The Queen's smile froze, her fingers clenched into the folds of her gown. Alive? She hissed. Alive? That night she paced. When she emerged, her beauty was masked by the disguise of an old peddler woman. Her skin wrinkled, her shoulders stooped, her eyes hidden beneath a shawl. From her basket hung ribbons and laces bright as jewels. Her plan was perfect. She would not use force, only deception. The Queen's knock was gentle on the dwarf's cottage door. Pretty laces for sale, she crooned. Beautiful ribbons for a young lady. Snow White peered out through the window. Oh, what lovely laces, she said, forgetting for a moment the dwarf's warning. Come in, dear woman. The Queen smiled beneath her shawl. Allow me, child. Such beauty deserves to shine. Let me lace you up properly. Snow White turned, trusting, but as the old woman's fingers pulled the ribbons, they tightened, too tight. Her breath caught. Please, it's too, she gasped. Now you'll never be more beautiful than me, hissed the Queen, drawing the lace until Snow White collapsed. When the dwarfs returned, they found her lifeless upon the floor, her face pale as the first snow of winter. They worked quickly, loosening the ribbons until her breath returned. When her eyes fluttered open, they cried with relief. That was your stepmother, they said. Promise us, Snow White. Never open the door again. I promise, she whispered. But promises are fragile things when magic and malice walk the same road. Back in the castle, the Queen stood before her mirror once more, her voice trembling with greed. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? You, my Queen, are fair, it's true. The pause lengthened, like the intake of breath before a storm. But Snow White beyond the hills, with 7 dwarfs, is fairer still. The Queen's scream cracked the mirror's surface. Her rage was volcanic, terrible to behold. Twice deceived, she cried. Then she shall not wake again. This time she brewed something far deadlier. A poison comb, black as midnight, steeped in venom that could stop the heart in a breath. Disguised once more, she travelled through the forest, knocking softly upon the dwarf's door. Pretty combs for your lovely hair, dear child, she said sweetly through the window. Snow White hesitated. I promised not to let anyone in. No need, crooned the woman. See, I can show you from here. A gift for such a face as yours. The comb glittered. Snow White could not resist. She opened the window just wide enough to accept it. May I place it in your hair? The woman asked. Snow White nodded shyly, but the moment the comb touched her scalp, she fell. The Queen's eyes gleamed. Now, she whispered, you will sleep forever. When the dwarfs returned, they found Snow White lying still again, and found the comb glinting in her hair. They pulled it free, and she stirred once more, colour returning to her cheeks. She wept as she clung to them. Oh, my friends, how many times will I fail my promise? Not again, said the eldest, his voice shaking. If you hear a voice, if you see a shadow, hide. Do not speak. Do not open the door. Snow White nodded. Mirror, mirror on the wall, said the Queen, her lips trembling with hatred. Who is the fairest one of all? And once again, the mirror's reply struck like a dagger. You, my Queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White beyond the hills, with 7 dwarfs, is fairer still. The Queen's eyes darkened to pitch. Then I shall craft a gift that no breath can undo. In her chamber of secrets, she mixed her deadliest spell yet, a crimson apple, half pure, half poisoned, split between light and death. Its skin gleamed with temptation. This, she whispered, shall taste of love and end in silence. By the next dawn, she had transformed herself into a kindly farmer woman, carrying a basket of apples through the mist. She knocked softly at the dwarf's cottage door. Delicious apples, dear child, she said. Fresh from the orchard. Snow White's voice came weakly through the wood. I cannot let anyone in. That's all right, sweet one. Look, I'll cut one in half, see? I'll eat the white side. You may try the red. A fair trade. Snow White watched as the woman bit into her half and smiled. Harmless. Warm. and the apple was so perfect, so fragrant, so bright. She took a small bite of her half, the red half. At once she fell to the ground, the apple rolling from her hand. The queen's eyes glittered with cruel triumph. Now she breathed, the fairest of them all is I. She disappeared into the forest's shadows, laughter scattering the birds like falling leaves. When the dwarfs came home, the door stood ajar. Snow White lay pale and still upon the floor. No lace could be loosened, no comb removed, no spell undone, for this time death itself had kissed her. For 3 days and nights they wept, keeping vigil by candlelight. They could not bury her. Her beauty remained untouched, as if she merely slept. So they built a glass coffin, carved with her name, and laid it upon the mountain, where sunlight could touch her face. One dwarf always stood watch, day after day, year after year. And in the kingdom below, the queen stood before her mirror one final time. Mirror, mirror on the wall, she whispered, exhausted but hungry still, who is the fairest one of all? And the mirror, the cruel mirror, at last replied, you, my queen, are the fairest of all. A smile curved her lips, but deep within, something was gone, something she could not reclaim, for beauty that feeds on envy eats its own reflection. So the world slept, Snow White beneath glass, the dwarfs beneath sorrow, the queen beneath lies. But destiny, like spring, waits patiently beneath the snow. And one day soon, it would wake. Time passed gently over the little glade where Snow White lay beneath her glass coffin. The seasons turned. Spring kissed the hills with flowers, summer wrapped them in gold, autumn cloaked them in fire, and winter laid its white hand upon her resting place. Yet still, she did not stir. The 7 dwarfs kept their promise. Each day, they visited her. One brought fresh flowers, another brushed away the leaves, another cleaned the glass, though tears often blurred his vision. And always, one kept watch, for none of them could bear to leave her alone. They whispered stories to her, as though she could still hear. They sang her songs to chase away the silence. And in the stillness of the mountain forest, it was said that even the birds sang softer when they flew above her resting place. Snow White slept, untouched by time. Her cheeks still blushed faintly with rose, her lips remained red as holly berries. The dwarfs often wondered, was this death, or a spell so deep that only love could break it? Then one day, when the snow was melting and the first green shoots rose through the frost, a young prince rode through the forest. He was a quiet soul, not seeking glory or gold, but solitude and peace. The whisper of birds drew him toward the mountain glen, where sunlight shimmered strangely through the trees. And there, between the stones and moss, he saw the coffin. He dismounted slowly, breath caught in his throat. What angel lies here? He whispered. Beneath the glass he saw her, a maiden more beautiful than any dream. Upon the coffin's golden frame were words engraved, Snow White, daughter of a king. The prince's heart trembled. He knelt beside her and bowed his head. He could not bear the thought that such beauty, such innocence, should be lost to silence forever. When the dwarfs appeared from the shadows, they were wary at first. The eldest spoke. Good sir, this maiden is beyond all saving. We have guarded her for many seasons. I know, said the prince softly. I can see it in your eyes. You loved her dearly. He hesitated, his voice breaking. Please, let me take her with me. I will build her a place of honor in my father's castle. I will remember her every day of my life. The dwarfs murmured among themselves. They saw truth in his face, not the hunger of possession, but the sorrow of reverence. And so at last they agreed. They lifted the coffin and began the slow journey down the mountain path. But as they walked, the path grew steep and tangled. One dwarf stumbled upon a tree root, and the coffin jolted sharply. In that instant, so small, so fragile, the spell broke. A tiny piece of the poisoned apple, lodged in Snow White's throat, was dislodged by the sudden motion. She gasped, the first sound in years, and her chest rose with breath. The dwarfs froze. The prince turned, eyes wide with disbelief. Where am I? Snow White whispered. The prince fell to his knees beside her, tears in his eyes. You are safe now, my lady. The darkness is gone. She looked around, at the dwarfs, at the forest, at the kind stranger before her. Did you wake me? He smiled softly. Not I, but fate, and the love that never forgot you. Snow White rose weakly from the coffin, and the forest seemed to sigh in relief. The dwarfs wept with joy, embracing her hands. Come with me, said the prince gently, to my castle. There, no one will harm you again. will you be my queen?" Snow White's eyes shimmered. She glanced once more at her 7 friends, her saviors, her family. "If I may still visit you," she said, "then yes, I will go." And so, beneath the golden afternoon sun, they walked together down the mountain, the girl reborn, the prince who believed, and the friends who had guarded her through every sorrow. Word of Snow White's awakening spread like wildfire through the kingdom. At last, joy returned to the people who had long mourned their lost princess. The king himself wept when he saw his daughter alive and radiant. Soon, a royal wedding was declared, a celebration of life conquering death, of innocence restored. The castle was adorned with garlands, and the bells rang for 3 days and nights. Guests came from distant lands, and even the forest creatures, foxes, birds, and deer, gathered near to listen to the music that drifted through the hills. But far away, in the queen's dark tower, another sound echoed. A whisper, a question. "Mirror, mirror on the wall," she said with trembling lips, "who is the fairest one of all?" The mirror's surface rippled with dread. "You, my queen, are fair, it's true." The voice faltered. "But the new queen is fairer than you." The queen's heart turned to stone. She screamed, a sound that cracked through the castle halls like thunder. "No, she cannot live. I will see her with my own eyes. I will see her and know." She disguised herself one last time and rode to the royal wedding. The great hall shimmered with light. Candles glowed, silk rustled, and Snow White, now dressed in ivory and gold, shone brighter than the chandeliers above her. At her side stood the prince, steadfast, gentle, proud. Guests turned as the last figure entered, cloaked, hooded, silent. Few recognized her, but the mirror had not lied. The queen's face was pale with envy, her eyes burning with disbelief. Snow White looked upon her and felt not hatred, but pity. For this was still her stepmother, broken by vanity, undone by her own reflection. The queen stepped forward, her voice shaking. You live?" "I do," said Snow White quietly, "and I forgive you." But fate, cruel and just, had already woven its end. The court had learned the truth, the huntsman's confession, the mirror's deceit, the queen's crimes. And so, by royal decree, a punishment awaited her. 2 iron shoes, heated red-hot in the fire, were brought forth. The queen was forced to dance in them until her strength failed, until she fell to the floor and moved no more. And thus ended her reign, not in glory, but in ashes. Snow White wept quietly, not for herself, but for the soul that had been consumed by envy. The prince held her close. "Let her rest," he whispered. "Her war is over." And so the doors of the great hall were opened, and sunlight streamed in, washing the shadows from the room. Snow White and her prince ruled with kindness and peace. They never forgot the 7 dwarfs who had saved her, and every season they visited the mountain cottage, now filled with laughter, fresh bread, and the songs that once kept her company. She tended the same garden she had loved as a child, and the mirror, long cracked and silent, gathered dust in the forgotten tower, and the people said that never again would vanity rule the land, for a queen of true beauty needs no mirror at all. And so ends the tale of Snow White, the child of winter, the maiden of mercy, and the queen who taught the world that love outshines envy, and gentleness outlives cruelty. They all lived happily ever after. Discover the original story of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, retold in a breathtaking cinematic storybook style for families, teens, and nostalgic dreamers. This full-length fairy tale audiobook explores the timeless themes of jealousy, kindness, and the true beauty of the heart. Perfect for bedtime, reflection, or cozy listening on Magic Fairy Tales TV. In this magical retelling, Snow White's journey reminds us that courage and compassion shine brighter than envy. Stay till the end for a heartwarming message about forgiveness and self-worth. In the quiet after the Queen's fall, peace came like dawn after a long storm. The castle, once filled with whispers of vanity and fear, now echoed with laughter. The courtyards bloomed again, and where the Queen's black roses had once grown, new white blossoms unfurled, pale as snow, pure as forgiveness. Snow White often walked the gardens alone at sunrise. The dew sparkled on the petals, and the air carried the sweet scent of renewal. Sometimes she thought she could almost hear her mother's voice, like a song carried on the wind. "Remember, my daughter, beauty is not in the face, but in the heart that dares to be kind." Those words guided her. She ruled beside her prince with quiet strength, never seeking mirrors, never asking who was fairest, for she knew, the fairest are those who see the good in others. Years passed, and the story of the young queen became a legend told at every hearth. Children listened wide-eyed, learning that envy burns and kindness heals. Travelers came from distant lands, carrying tales of a kingdom reborn through grace. And in the dwarf's little cottage, laughter never ceased. Snow White and the prince visited often, bringing baskets of food, gifts, and songs. When the nights were long and winter deep, they sat together around the fire, remembering how light had triumphed over darkness. In the queen's abandoned chamber, the once glorious mirror still hung upon the wall. Its surface was cracked, its magic broken. But sometimes on quiet nights, the servants claimed they could hear a faint whisper from within it, fairest of all. And then silence. For the mirror no longer had a master, nor a question to answer. The world had no need for such vanity anymore. One winter evening, as snow fell gently across the castle roofs, Snow White watched from her balcony. The prince wrapped a warm cloak around her shoulders. "Do you ever wonder," he asked softly, "what became of the mirror?" She smiled faintly. Perhaps it learned what we all must, that beauty fades, but goodness stays. They looked out over their kingdom, where lanterns glowed in the windows and laughter rose from every home. The stars above shimmered, each one a memory, each one a promise. And so the tale of Snow White was passed down, not just as a story of magic and danger, but as a reminder that the truest magic is the courage to love, and the rarest treasure is a heart that forgives. When the moonlight touches your window and the world feels quiet and kind, remember Snow White, and let your heart be the fairest of all. And so, the mirror at last fell silent, its jealous whisper swallowed by the kindness of a heart that forgave. Snow White's beauty was never her crown. It was the light she carried, unbroken by envy, unshadowed by fear. In a world where mirrors still ask who is fairest, may we remember, true beauty is not seen, it is felt. Thank you for journeying through this timeless story with us. Here at Magic Fairy Tales TV, where old magic finds new hearts. If this tale warmed your heart, don't let the magic fade. Like the video to support more magical stories, comment your favorite moment or lesson from Snow White. Subscribe now to Magic Fairy Tales TV, where every story is a door to wonder. And turn on the notification bell so you never miss a bedtime story. Watch next: Cinderella, The Glass Wish, The Midnight Owl Parade, The Ghost Who Forgot to Boo.